After years of betrayal, heartbreak, and unimaginable struggle, Aminata rose from the ashes of her shattered life. She survived the streets, fought poverty, and rebuilt herself from nothing, while Jabari, the man who once destroyed her dreams, reveled in luxury and false success, only to be caught in his own web of lies. Shakira exposed his fraud, Jabari was sent to prison, and Aminata's life began a new chapter of resilience and triumph.
The city had changed since Aminata first arrived as a scared, homeless girl. Streets that once seemed cruel and indifferent now whispered of opportunity, of battles fought and won, though invisible to the casual passerby. Every corner, every marketplace, every bridge she had slept under reminded her of the life she had clawed her way out of. And yet, she rarely thought of it in terms of bitterness. Instead, she saw the journey for what it was, a forge that had strengthened her, tempered her into someone unbreakable. Today, she stood in the sunlight streaming through the glass windows of her office, the faint hum of the city below a comforting backdrop to the life she had built with her own hands. The walls, neat and organized, held the quiet authority of someone in charge, someone who commanded respect not through wealth or fear, but through competence, integrity, and sheer determination. Her desk was cluttered with inventory reports, sales projections, and letters from suppliers, but she felt calm, grounded, in complete control of her environment. She had risen from selling oranges on a cracked pavement to managing an entire sales team, supervising logistics, negotiating with distributors, and overseeing the expansion of her fruit empire. Each action she took was deliberate, careful, yet infused with the empathy she had learned from Mama Corey, whose wisdom and faith had guided her even after death. Aminata never forgot that her power did not come from revenge, from harming those who wronged her, but from mastery of her own destiny, from refusing to allow others to define her worth. Life in her new role was not without its challenges. Running a distribution company meant long hours, constant negotiations, and decisions that could make or break contracts worth thousands of naira. There were days when a shipment would go missing, when a supplier would refuse to honor terms, or when staff conflicts threatened the smooth operation she had worked so tirelessly to achieve. But Aminata approached each obstacle with a quiet determination that left her employees in awe. She remembered her own struggles on the streets, the endless hours of peeling oranges in the sweltering sun, and the nights spent shivering under bridges while rain soaked through her thin wrapper. Those memories were not burdens but fuel. They reminded her that failure was temporary, that resilience was everything, and that nothing could shake the foundation she had built from sheer will and intelligence. Even as she negotiated with clients in fancy offices, dressed in sharp suits and polished shoes, her mind sometimes drifted to simpler things: the faces of street vendors, the smell of fresh oranges, the hope in the eyes of those trying desperately to survive. In those moments, she realized that her power was not just in her wealth or position, but in her ability to remain human, compassionate, and grounded in a world that often prized cruelty and greed. It was this rare combination of strength and empathy that set her apart from the executives she worked with, who often saw only numbers and profit margins. Meanwhile, across the city, Jabari Kumar was learning the full measure of what his greed and betrayal had cost him. Prison had not been kind. It had been an unrelenting teacher. He had been stripped of everything: luxury, family, social standing, and even the fragile illusion of respect he had once clung to. 3 years of concrete walls, foul food, and the unceasing hum of despair had transformed him into a shadow of the man who had once schemed and manipulated his way into comfort. Each day, he had been forced to confront not only the mistakes he had made, but the reality that some things once lost could never be reclaimed. His pride, that dangerous, consuming force that had guided him toward betrayal, was gone. In its place was an almost unbearable awareness of his own inadequacy, a deep, gnawing regret that came unbidden every time he closed his eyes. Letters to Shakira had gone unanswered, and his family in the village had offered only cold reproach, reminding him of the boy he once was and the man he had ruined himself to become. The streets had become his teacher too, streets that punished his ignorance of humility, that reminded him daily of the privileges he had squandered, and of the woman he had destroyed without a second thought. Yet even in this darkness, Jabari began to understand something vital: that true strength strength was not in manipulation or wealth, but in patience, honesty, and the courage to face oneself without excuses. For the first time in years, he considered the possibility that redemption might be achievable, that he could learn to live in a way that did not harm others, that he might find a place in the world without taking what was not his. Back in her office, Aminata received the first signs that her empire could grow beyond the city she had once navigated as a girl with nothing. Expansion plans, new contracts, and proposals from investors were arriving faster than she could process them, yet she handled each with meticulous care. Every meeting, every phone call, every decision reflected the lessons she had learned on the streets, that patience, diligence, and observation were often more powerful than force or intimidation. Even in her moments of triumph, she remembered the girl who had cried under the bridge, who had watched people pass by without compassion or notice, and she felt a quiet gratitude for her journey. David, her husband, was an unshakable pillar of support, balancing the life they now shared with the respect and admiration that had been absent from her earlier relationships. Their love was a partnership, equal and nurturing, built not on need or convenience, but on mutual respect and shared ambition. Each evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline and the city lights flickered to life, Aminata would sit by the window, sipping tea, and reflect on the path she had walked. From oranges on the pavement to boardroom tables, from homelessness to a roof over her head she could call her own, from rejection to recognition, she realized that her journey was more than just survival. It was a testament to the power of resilience, integrity, and unwavering hope. And as she looked out at the sprawling city below, a city that had once threatened to break her, she knew with absolute certainty that she was no longer the girl who had been dismissed, humiliated, and abandoned. She was a force, a leader, and a woman who had claimed her place in the world not by taking from others, but by building herself with her own hands. The prison gates clanged behind Jabari Kamar, a sound that reverberated in his chest long after he had stepped onto the city streets. The sky above was pale, the morning sun washed in cold light, and everything felt alien. For 3 long years, the world had passed him by, and he had been trapped in his own mistakes, facing the consequences of greed, betrayal, and pride. Every friend he had once relied on had vanished. Every luxury that had once defined him was gone. He walked through streets that had grown unfamiliar, noticing the harshness of the pavement beneath his worn shoes, the stench of garbage in alleys, the crowded sidewalks teeming with people who seemed to have no time for a man with nothing to offer. Jabari's stomach knotted at the sight of beggars and street vendors. Once, he would have sneered at their poverty, but now he recognized in their eyes the same desperation, the same uncertainty he had once ignored. Pride was gone, replaced by an aching awareness of his own fragility. He had learned, in the hardest way possible, that a life built on manipulation and lies could crumble faster than he had ever imagined, leaving nothing but the raw exposure of one's mistakes. The first weeks outside prison were relentless. Jabari applied for every job he could find, from construction sites to delivery services, even offering to clean offices or wash cars for pennies, anything to survive. Rejection followed rejection, each one a reminder of his past sins and present vulnerability. Employers stared at his prison record, shook their heads, and said no, and Jabari learned quickly that his old confidence, once a weapon, was now meaningless. He began to understand humility, but it came with a bitter taste. For the first time, he felt what it meant to be powerless, to be ignored, to be invisible in a world he had once believed belonged to him. His pride, the trait that had made him ambitious and cunning, now punished him. Each night, he returned to his rented room, bare walls, cheap bed, reflecting on the woman he had destroyed. Aminata, her face, her dignity, the empire she had built, haunted him. He remembered the day she had walked away from him, from his deceit, and for the first time, he realized that no amount of pleading or manipulation could have undone the choices he had made. She had survived. She had thrived.
And he had nothing.
Meanwhile, Aminata's life had continued to blossom. Her mornings were filled with inventory checks, calls to suppliers, and meticulous planning for the expansion of the supermarket chain she now co-owned with David. The warehouse had grown, a bustling hub of activity where employees moved efficiently, following the systems she had implemented. Each day, she felt the weight of responsibility, but also the satisfaction of knowing her work mattered. David, ever supportive, trusted her implicitly, allowing her to manage operations while he focused on strategic growth and investment opportunities. Their partnership was built on mutual respect, honesty, and love, a stark contrast to her past with Jabari, where deceit and manipulation had ruled every interaction. Aminata often reflected on her journey, the contrast between the life she had built and the chaos she had endured, and she felt a quiet pride, not in revenge, not in seeing others suffer, but in knowing that she had preserved her integrity and that her success was a product of perseverance, intelligence, and unwavering resilience. Jabari's fortunes shifted one morning when he noticed a discreet advertisement posted on the notice board outside a large office building in the business district. Driver needed. Experienced, reliable. Immediate start. Good pay. His pulse quickened. Driving had been one of the few skills he had honed before prison, a skill that had once given him a foothold into wealth and comfort. Clutching the address, he took a bus across the city with the last coins he had. The office building was imposing, glass towers reflecting sunlight, symbolizing wealth and stability, things he could no longer claim. Inside, he was greeted by an HR assistant, a young woman who asked the questions he expected: experience, references, and a brief account of his background. With no references, he hesitated, then spoke with honesty, a newfound honesty born from the harsh lessons of incarceration. "I was in prison," he admitted, his voice low, "for mistakes I made. Fraud, theft, betrayal. I am seeking a chance to start over, to earn honestly." The woman's eyes flickered with recognition of something rare: contrition, humility, and the courage to face the consequences of one's actions. She excused him for a moment, and when she returned, she said simply, "The CEO would like to meet you personally." The elevator ride to the executive floor was nerve-wracking, each floor a reminder of the world he had lost and the world he hoped might give him a chance. He entered the CEO's office, expecting a stern, judgmental man, but was met instead by calm authority. David Okonkwo, tall, composed, a man radiating quiet strength, listened to Jabari recount his story. He did not interrupt, nor did he recoil. When Jabari finished, David leaned back and said something that would seal the ultimate irony: "Everyone deserves a second chance. The job is yours if you want it." Jabari could barely comprehend the words, relief and disbelief warring within him. He was being handed a position driving for one of the most powerful households in the city, a household he could never have imagined, a household that included the very woman he had ruined, the woman he had spurned, the woman whose life he had thoughtlessly destroyed. The reality of what lay ahead did not escape him. He would serve Aminata, now a CEO and the wife of a man who respected and cherished her, in the very position he had once considered beneath him. As he walked away from David's office with his uniform and instructions, a silent, gnawing anxiety grew inside him. The world had balanced the scales of karma perfectly, and he would soon come face to face with the consequences of his own greed in the most intimate and humiliating way imaginable. The next morning, Jabari woke before sunrise, nerves twisting in his stomach like a living thing. His uniform hung stiffly over the chair, pressed and immaculate, a symbol of his new reality. He had been given a chance, a lifeline, but it came with a cruel twist. The one person he had wronged, the one whose life he had attempted to manipulate and destroy, would now occupy a position of power over him. Aminata. He rehearsed every polite greeting, every deferential nod, every word of caution he could summon, yet none of it seemed enough. No training could have prepared him for the moment when he would see her again, not as the frightened, helpless girl he had dismissed, but as the woman who had risen from the ashes of his betrayal to claim a life he could only dream of. He dressed carefully, checked the car, and set out toward the Okonkwo residence, every mile between him and the mansion feeling like a journey into the abyss of his own shame. The streets were familiar, yet they mocked him. Once he had moved through them with arrogance. Now he walked through them as a man stripped of pride, humbled to his core. As Jabari arrived at the mansion, the gates loomed like guardians of a life he had once sought and now could only serve. The driver's entrance, discreet and functional, was where he parked the car, the polished floors gleaming under his careful footsteps. He straightened his back, swallowed hard, and waited. The door opened sharply, and there she was, Aminata. Her presence filled the space with quiet authority, a natural command that drew attention even without the need for words. She was dressed in professional attire, her hair sleek, her gaze confident yet composed. She regarded him briefly, her eyes steady and unyielding, as though measuring not just who he was now, but who he had been. Jabari's throat went dry. Every memory of deceit, every act of betrayal, every insult he had once thrown at her surged like fire through his veins. And yet, she looked at him with a measured indifference, not cruelty. The woman who had survived his worst actions did not need revenge. She simply existed, untouchable, above the petty failures of the man who had once thought he could control her. The drive to the office that morning was tense beyond words. Jabari's hands gripped the steering wheel as if it could anchor him against the storm of emotion rising inside. Aminata sat beside him, phone in hand, eyes scanning emails and texts, occasionally giving directions in a calm, clipped tone. She did not speak to him beyond instructions, yet every word, every glance reminded him of his place, a place far beneath her. Each intersection, each stoplight, every casual command she issued was a subtle assertion of power he had never before experienced. The man who had once dictated her life, who had manipulated respected her and sought to control her future, now obeyed, silent and obedient, while she navigated the streets of the city with authority and purpose. The irony was exquisite. Jabari's mind spun with memories of her past struggles, her courage, her refusal to be subdued, and he realized, with a sinking dread, that she had become exactly what he had failed to recognize, a force of nature, unstoppable, brilliant, and fully independent of him. Upon reaching the distribution warehouse, Aminata gave him instructions with precise clarity, showing him where to park, which routes to take for deliveries, and how to handle the trucks. She moved among the employees like a conductor orchestrating a complex symphony, her presence commanding respect without the need for raised voices or threats. Jabari followed, silently noting the stark difference between her leadership and his own previous attempts to dominate others with fear or deceit. Aminata's power was quiet yet absolute, earned through competence, vision, and resilience. Jabari's stomach twisted as he realized that the girl he had dismissed, the woman he had humiliated, had built a life of impact, influence, and admiration, all while he had squandered the last opportunities life had given him. She walked past him occasionally, her eyes meeting his in a glance of recognition, but not of forgiveness. Indifference, not anger, was her weapon, and it cut deeper than any word of scorn could ever have done. In that moment, Jabari understood that he had not just lost her, he had lost the right to even touch the life she now commanded. The day stretched on, long and punishing in its quiet reminders of Jabari's failure. He drove her to meetings, assisted with deliveries, and handled errands that were mundane yet humiliating to a man who had once imagined himself a master of wealth and influence. Meanwhile, Aminata's world flourished around him. Staff moved efficiently, clients greeted her warmly, and David's confidence in her grew with each passing hour. He watched her negotiate with suppliers, guide her employees, and make decisions that impacted lives and livelihoods, all with a calm authority that left him trembling inside. Yet, through it all, she treated him with a fairness a professional demanded, nothing more. She allowed him to exist within her orbit, but she never granted him dominance, never offered him the satisfaction of recognition. Each act of kindness, each neutral acknowledgement, was a reminder of his humility. Jabari began to realize the truth that had eluded him for so long. She did not need him, she did not rely on him, and her happiness, her success, was not contingent on his presence or absence. He was finally seeing her not as a woman to be conquered, but as a person to be revered, and in that reverence lay his most profound punishment, the knowledge that he had thrown away the chance to walk beside her. Not now, not ever. Days turned into weeks, and for Jabari, each morning began with the same ritual of dread. He woke early, bathed quickly, dressed neatly, and arrived at the Okonkwo mansion before the sun had fully risen. Every step toward the gate, every turn into the driveway, was a confrontation with his own failures, a reminder of the life he had once held and now could never reclaim. Aminata moved through her day with effortless grace, embodying the success, strength, and authority that Jabari had once mocked. Her presence commanded attention, not through fear or intimidation, but through respect and admiration, qualities he had never known how to earn. He observed her as she entered meetings with suppliers, navigated complex negotiations, and managed her growing team with an intelligence that seemed both natural and refined. Every gesture, every decision, was a quiet, constant reminder that she had become everything he could have been if he had chosen honesty, loyalty, and resilience over deceit, arrogance, and greed. The irony was unbearable. The girl he had humiliated, the one he had sought to control and destroy, now controlled the narrative of his existence. She was the pulse of the household, the mind behind the business, and the heart of the man he had envied and resented. And he was just the one opening doors, driving her to meetings, and silently witnessing the brilliance of a life he could never touch again. Inside the mansion, the staff followed her lead without hesitation. Aminata had transformed the household into a place of order, efficiency, and dignity, a reflection of the woman she had become. She addressed her employees with clarity, respect, and genuine concern, creating an environment where excellence thrived. Each time Jabari was tasked with a delivery or a personal errand, he noticed the small yet powerful differences in her leadership, her ability to inspire loyalty, her careful attention to detail, her patience with mistakes, and her firm but kind enforcement of standards. One day, he watched her calmly defuse a heated argument between two managers, her voice steady, her words precise, commanding attention without raising a hand or a tone. She was firm, decisive, and yet compassionate, a stark contrast to the world he had once sought to dominate, where fear was his only currency. He realized painfully that everything he had believed about power, control, and influence had been a lie. True authority, he understood now, came not from manipulation or wealth alone, but from character, resilience, and the ability to rise above of petty grievances. Aminata had mastered all of it, while he had mastered nothing but regret. Every drive, every trip, every glance at her poised figure reminded him of the consequences of his choices, each one sharper, more piercing than any prison sentence or financial ruin he had endured. Evenings were the hardest. When David returned from his office, cheerful, warm, and attentive, he would greet Aminata with admiration and love that was effortless and unquestioned. He trusted her decisions implicitly, celebrated her accomplishments, and encouraged her ambitions without hesitation. Jabari, sitting silently in the driver's seat or in the shadows of the mansion's corridors, felt the sting of his own inadequacy, like a living weight pressing down on his chest. He could not argue, could not interject, could not claim even a fragment of the life he had lost. He was a witness to the happiness he had forsaken, the love he had scorned, and the respect he had abandoned in pursuit of wealth he could never fully enjoy. Sometimes, he caught Aminata laughing with David, a sound so genuine, so warm, that it made his stomach turn with envy and shame. She was thriving, not through revenge, not through spite, but through her own strength, intelligence, and kindness. And he was merely a servant to her world, a living testament to the karmic law he had ignored for years. As the weeks passed, Jabari began to see the subtle ways in which Aminata exercised control without cruelty, small decisions, polite corrections, patient instruction, and the quiet confidence of a woman who knew exactly who she was and what she deserved. He realized, with a painful clarity, that this was a punishment far more profound than prison, to serve the very person he had destroyed, to witness her rise while he remained tethered to the consequences of his own choices. The life that had once seemed inevitable for him, wealth, status, power, respect, had evaporated, replaced by a new reality where every action, every word, every glance was a reminder of his hubris. And through it all, Aminata remained serene, composed, and untouchable, the living embodiment of resilience, the irrefutable proof that he had lost everything that mattered most, and that no amount of remorse could ever reclaim. Jabari had been working for months in the Okonkwo household, performing his duties with meticulous care, yet every day felt like a lesson in humility. He drove Aminata to business meetings, ran errands, and occasionally assisted David, but never once did he forget the truth. This was the woman he had destroyed. Every morning, as he watched her stride confidently through the front door, briefcase in hand, radiant and untouchable, a deep sense of remorse settled in his chest. He thought about the choices that had led him here, the lies, the greed, the betrayal, and the contrast could not have been starker. Aminata's life had blossomed in ways he had never imagined, each day a testimony to her strength, her resilience, and her refusal to let anyone define her worth. He noticed how she treated her employees with respect, fairness, and encouragement, qualities he had mocked or disregarded in the past. Her presence filled every room, every corridor, with energy and authority, and he realized that her power was not something that could be taken away. It was forged from experience, courage, and unwavering self-belief. Even in her smallest gestures, from a kind word to a corrective instruction, Aminata's actions reminded him that she had become more than he could ever have been, and that his life, once intertwined with hers, had now become a lesson in watching someone thrive while he bore the consequences of his choices. David, Aminata's husband, continued to be the steadfast, loving presence that Jabari had never understood or valued in his own life. Watching David interact with her, with patience, admiration, and genuine affection, was a constant reminder that love could never be bought, coerced, or manipulated. Aminata had chosen a life built on partnership, mutual respect, and shared dreams, and every glance, every touch, and every conversation between them was evidence of the fulfillment he had lost. Jabari had initially feared her judgment, her anger, or her vindictiveness, but instead, he found something far more powerful: her indifference to his humiliation and her unwavering focus on her own success and happiness. That indifference was a force stronger than any revenge he could have imagined. It was a quiet, potent proof that she had moved beyond the man who tried to control her and had instead elevated herself through perseverance, intelligence, and grace. As days turned into months, Jabari began to internalize a bitter but essential truth. Life's most profound justice was not punishment inflicted by others, but the natural consequences of one's own actions. Aminata had never sought to hurt him. She had only lived her life, and in doing so, she had shown him, more clearly than any prison sentence or financial loss could, the weight of betrayal, the cost of greed, and the power of personal integrity. He could not undo his past, but he could learn, and perhaps, in some distant future, he could be a man who acted with honesty, humility, and respect. The turning point came one evening when Aminata hosted a corporate celebration at her office. She had invited her employees, business partners, and some loyal clients to mark a year of unprecedented represented growth and achievement. The office was alive with laughter, the clinking of glasses, and warm conversations. Jabari stood in the background, serving as usual, carrying trays of drinks unnoticed by most, invisible in the crowd he had once believed he belonged to. Yet, even in his diminished state, he could not help but admire the life she had built. Aminata moved from guest to guest with ease, radiating confidence and warmth, taking the time to acknowledge achievements, share laughs, and inspire loyalty. At one point, she paused near the center of the room, glanced at the floor, and caught sight of Jabari's trembling hands. Their eyes met for a brief, silent moment. No words were exchanged, but the understanding was profound. He was not her concern, her anger, or her enemy. He was a shadow of his own making, a witness to her triumph. Later that evening, David came over to Jabari, offering him a simple but meaningful acknowledgement. "You're doing your job well. Keep it up." There was no mockery, no superiority, only recognition of effort, the kind of honesty Jabari had never experienced from the man he had once envied. As he walked home that night, uniform pressed and hands empty, Jabari felt something he had not felt in years: clarity. He understood that success, love, and happiness could not be stolen or manipulated. They were earned, nurtured, and protected through character, perseverance, and respect. Aminata had shown him this truth in every interaction, every decision, and every day of her remarkable journey. He realized, finally, that her greatest power had never been wealth, beauty, or status. It had been her unbreakable spirit, the courage to rise above betrayal, and the refusal to let anyone, including him, define her destiny. And in that realization, Jabari found a strange sense of peace. He had lost everything that once mattered, but through her example, he saw the possibility of becoming someone better, someone worthy, someone who might, one day, act with honor rather than greed. Aminata, meanwhile, continued to live her life fully, joyfully, and powerfully, her empire and her heart intact, a living testament to the truth that those who destroy others are ultimately destroyed by themselves, while those who endure, persevere, and rise above become untouchable.